All right, so what we're doing is a fresh start series, and I'm calling it Where the Veteran Becomes the Newbie Again, just for you. What I'm doing is what most experienced players won't. We're going to be starting completely from scratch. No hand me downs, no heirlooms, no boosts, no freaking gold. Just me in the game as if I've never played before. This is a brand new account. I have it on a separate installation than my normal main account. I've even got it set up so that the add ons that I use are coming from a different source so that we keep them separate from my normal gaming account. Now, I remember what it was like when I was new, and you get told what to do by people who already know the answer, but they don't explain to you why. They're just expecting you to, you know, be able to figure it out. They just want you to nod, follow, and figure it out later. And that itself is not helpful. It makes you feel like you're constantly behind. So here, what we're not doing is the easy way. We're doing it the learning way, the real way, the kind of playthrough that helps you actually understand what's going on so you can make your own decisions later. All right. So what we're starting off with is the first intro screen. All right. We've got all these weird little arrows pointing stuff out. You can see I'm on my free trial right now. I bought the game, but I haven't bought a subscription yet. So we're going to go with it like that for this, you know, short episode that we're doing. I will go ahead and do a subscription later so that we can keep going further and further. But there are some things that I want you as a new player to see from the very beginning where you might be starting out on a free trial. And one of the first things we do is get rid of all of this crap. All your characters show up in your warband creation list across the realms. It's like, what the hell is all that? Okay, so this area right here is where your characters are going to show up. Okay? You're going to have this cool little background, and you'll have your four main characters that'll be sitting around a campfire or something like that. It's pretty. Okay, that's all it is. So we can get rid of this, and we can get rid of this. We can also get rid of this. Because all it is it lets you choose which campsites you're using. By default, you have Adventurer's Rest, which is, like in Stranglethorn Vale or some jungle area like that. Or you have the Onaran Overlook, which is in a dragonflight zone where a lot of like minotaurs and stuff live. So you can choose which one you want to do. In fact, I think if I choose it right now, not even having any characters made, it still won't show up. So we're just going to close that out, close out the campsites. The first thing we're going to do is go to the menu, right? We're going to check out some of our options. One of the first options I like to use is going to my audio and turning off the music. The music's good. If you like the music, you're playing by yourself, turn it on later. For purposes of this video, I'm not going to have music from WoW playing in the background. Um, I'm going to also limit certain other outputs like pet sounds, emote sounds. What those two are is like whenever somebody cheers, they type /cheer and you'll hear them go, yay, or something like that, right? It's annoying sometimes, but it adds to the whole vibe of the game. Not necessary. Pet sounds. If a hunter is running around with his tiger and they're sitting there chilling, the tiger will lay down and yawn, and you'll hear him. Roar. It's cool, but again, you're gonna hear it a billion frickin' times. It's one of those things that it's cool at first, but get rid of it, right? The other thing we're going to get rid of is error speech. If you're clicking a button over and over and over again, like say fireball or something like that, you cast the fireball, you've got 1 to 1.5 seconds before you can cast that fireball again. But you want to make sure you want to get that next fireball off as fast as possible. So you're clicking that button like crazy. And every time you click that button and that spell's not ready, It's going to let you know. It's going to say, that spell is not ready yet. Let's get rid of that. We're going to get rid of the error speech. Now, one that I do like having on is the dialogue. So that whenever you go up to like a quest character or something like that, you talk to him and he's going to say something like, "Hi, how are you doing?" Or something like that. Or, "Hi, adventurer, I have something to say to you." That can add some pretty good ambiance to the game. I like leaving it on, but I am going to go ahead and turn it off just for this series. Ambient sounds. I don't know if you can hear it right now, but you can kind of hear like birds chirping, stuff like that. Now they're gone. I like having them. They're cool to have. You'll hear horses clopping around. It is a little more immersive without being overwhelming. Now, with that being said, you can go up here and you can turn it down real high. Now we can really hear those birds chirping and stuff. Or we can turn it down to where we can just barely hear it. It's more of a background thing, right? Okay, well, we'll just keep it around mid to mid high level, right? Dialogue. Dialogue can be a little loud sometimes. So that's another one. We'll just kind of turn it down a little bit, right? So this handles audio for the most part. Okay. Audio channels, distance filtering, audio cache size, none of that really matters. Sound and background, you definitely want to turn off. Because say you need to go look something up on Wowhead, one of the websites that you can find tons of information on. Well, you need to alt tab out of the game. Well, if you've got this turned on while you're trying to look at Wowhead, you're still going to be hearing all of the sounds from the game. Now, that could be good if you're on a PvP server or something, and all of a sudden you're getting attacked and you can hear the sounds of you being attacked. You can tab back in real fast and hopefully kill that hunter that's trying to gank you or the rogue that snuck up on you. But if you're not really worried about that thing, I definitely suggest turning off sound in the background. Okay, enable reverb. Um, it's it's not something that really changes a whole lot. Like right here, the tooltip says this will affect performance. It really doesn't. I leave it on because it does make things sound a little more natural. It's going to be things like when you're in a cave, the sounds kind of echo, and it really does help with the atmosphere. So I definitely leave that one on. All right, so languages, we're going with English. Network, we're not worried about network. We are going to optimize the network for speed because we want to lag as little as possible. We don't want to worry about IPv6 because it can lead to certain issues with certain things. And we are going to turn on advanced combat logging. Now, this isn't something that we have to really worry about as new players, but it is something that comes into play once we get into the higher levels of endgame. When you hit level 80, or if you're watching this video at a later time, you're hitting 85, 90, whatever the level cap might be at the time, you're going to want to be able to log certain things to be able to say, go to a website, upload that log, and be able to view how well you were doing within that raid or dungeon or whatever. And you can't do that unless you've got advanced combat logging on. So it's one of those things. Let's just go ahead and turn it on. The next thing we'll take a look at graphics. I am playing on a laptop, doing all of this from here. I've got my secondary monitor set up so I can watch chat, things like that. But realistically, I've got a pretty good laptop. Um, there are some things we can put to ultra high, some things we can put to ultra low, things to help balance things out. Really, if you're getting 60 frames a second or more, you're doing great. If you're getting less than 60 frames a second, you might want to come in here, check some stuff out, right? Let's see if there's any of these that I think require any major attention. Um, Shadow quality, ultra high. We really don't need ultra high for shadows. Shadows are one of those things that it's kind of a subliminal thing. We're going to turn it down to high. Liquid detail, we want that on high. Liquid detail, for one thing, looks really good. It also helps for things like when you're fishing and stuff. Okay. Particle density controls the number of particles used in effects caused by spells, fires, etc. Decrease to improve performance. Now, the increase to your performance really isn't all that much, but what it does is it can lower how dense fire is. So if somebody blows something up with a bomb, like an NPC goblin throws a bomb and it explodes, it's going to be a big explosion, but it's also going to be dense. You're really not going to be able to see through it very well because of how many particles there are in that spell. There are other ways that this is affects other things, but I like to keep this one unfair. I want it in there. I want to have some particle density. I want to actually be able to see what's going on, but I don't want it to take away from the game. Uh, we don't need to worry about this one. It has to do with the advanced lighting and the rendering quality of the advanced lighting. We can turn it down, especially if you're on a lower spec system. Lighting effects, it's going to be more like your ray tracing. We're not using ray tracing, but it's the same idea where all has to do with lighting. You'd be amazed by how much lighting can really make everything pop. Now, that is something that can affect your performance, which is why I'm going to put it on high, but I'm not going to take it any lower. Depth effects controls the rendering of depth based particle effects. Decreasing this may improve performance. I'm actually not sure what this one is. No particle depth fading or refraction. Traditional sun shafts and glares. Low is particle depth fading and no refraction. Depth based sun shafts and glare. Okay, good. Particle depth fading and low resolution refraction. Oh, okay. So it sounds like what this has to do is like reflections and stuff. Again, it's one of those lighting things. I would keep this one on high. Uh, compute effects. Um, this is another one of those that is debatable. I would keep this on good. Um, Remember, you're wanting to keep a really good balance between being able to see as much as possible, get m- as good of an immersive feeling as you can without destroying your system. I am running on a 3050 Ti. Pretty good graphics card, but not the best. Uh, you know, I'm not willing to fork out 3,500 bucks for a 5090. The 3050 Ti was at a price point that I found was doing pretty good. That's why I went with this one. So some of these I am going to turn down. Outline mode controls whether the selection outline effect is allowed. See the interface display panel for more options. We're actually going to put this on high, and I will explain that one to you later. Now, texture resolution. Texture resolution, we want that one on high. We want good textures. Spell density. Dynamic sounds like it's the one you want because, as it says, it reduces non essential spells shown based on your frame rate. If you're above your desired frame rate, everything will be shown. It sucks. It does not work the way that it says. Okay? So what happens is you're in a raid, you got 30 freaking people spamming all kinds of spells. Spells are going off everywhere, and your frame rate is jumping all over the place because you've got dynamic on, and every time your frame rates drop to low, it'll stop giving you all the effects. So your frame rates jump back up. So it goes, oh, you've got good frame rates now. So it start showing you all the effects again. So you've got this yo-yo effect, and it sucks. Personally, I put it on half. You know, I put it on half so that I can actually see some of that stuff. Some of that stuff is pretty cool. I like being able to see it. If it becomes too much for you, put it on essential only, and it only shows essential spells. Your spells are always shown. but the essential spells that you need to be aware of, things like what the boss is going to do to you, that's what it's going to show you. Like I said, I like keeping mine on half or most, right? Okay. Projected textures enables the projecting of textures to the environment. Disabling this may improve performance. We want projected textures. It has to do with how we see things that are in the distance and how well they look. Okay. View distance all the way up. We want to be able to see as far as possible, right? That's what that is. Controls how far you can see. Larger view distances require more memory and a faster processor. When I was playing back in 2006, 2007, I was running on a shitty computer and I had to have this thing turned down all the way. And I could get targeted by people in a Rossi Basin and shot at by people I couldn't see. Right? This to me is one of the more important things you need to have on there. Environment, I'm sorry, view distance. Now, environment detail controls how far you can see objects. Okay, so say there's a fire in the distance, like a campfire. This is one of those things that's more about ambiance than anything. As you're walking forward, you're going to be able to see things at max viewing distance, like the mountains, the trees, the solid objects. Sometimes there are things like campfires or say a building or something like that that you can't see until you get close enough to see it, and it's really weird looking when you don't have the both of these set to the same level. So if you do need to turn down your viewing distance, you can leave this higher, but don't leave it lower. That makes things weird, and I'm just saying that visually it makes things weird. Now, ground clutter is something that friends of mine and I have debated about. Some of my friends having ground clutter turned up all the way. And if you're reading it, it says it controls the density and distance at which ground clutter items like grass and foliage are placed, decrease to improve performance. Myself, I turn it down all the way. It's not that it increases your performance so much, but there's really no reason for me to be walking along a random hill on the brand new blood elf that I made in the very first newbie zone, and it looks like I'm walking through a wheat field because there's so much grass waving around everywhere. You know, ground clutter is the stuff on the ground. Now, it's really not necessary. I have never had an instance where I've looked at a scene and the first thing I noticed was, oh man, they've got some really good ground clutter going on there. I turned that one all the way down. All right. Some of these advanced ones, um, ray trace shadows. Okay, so ray tracing has to do mostly with your RTX processors. I turn mine off. Ray tracing can really, really hurt your frames. Unless you have a really good graphics processor, I do not suggest using ray tracing at all. Even then, you can be going from 160 to 200 frames per second, turn on ray tracing, and suddenly you're getting 30 frames a second. It can be that drastic. Now, I'm not talking so much in World of Warcraft, more talking in other games, but World of Warcraft is one of those that, when you turn on ray tracing, you're definitely going to see a decrease in your performance. Let's see. Texture filtering, resample quality, VRS mode, graphics API. As you can see, I'm using DirectX 12. I am running on Windows. Damn sure don't want to use 11. And auto detect is just going to put it on 12. Physics interaction. I don't remember what this one is. I'm not sure what this one is. I'm gonna leave that one just normal. Um, I think it has to do with like body movement, things like that. Usually physics is going to be like ragdoll effects. Like if you fall off a cliff or you crash your car and get thrown through the windshield, how much do you ragdoll and how well Does it animate the ragdoll effect? That's usually what physics type stuff is. So, like I said, I'm going to leave that one at player and NPC. My graphics card, it's auto detecting because I want it to use my RTX 3050. I do not want it using my freaking Iris graphics card. Um, Auto detect is going to most likely put it on NVIDIA, but I'm going to force it. Max foreground FPS. We don't want it to be a max. Okay, we don't we don't want it to stop at 120. If it can give us 240 frames a second, let's go for it. Okay. Now, the max background frames per second, we want to. Okay, so this can cause issues with some computers. I've seen it happen before, not very often, but if you're not matching your normal frames, if you limit the frames that it does in the background, when you come back to the game, you can get some jitter, you can get some stutter. So I do tend to turn that one off completely. But what it means is that your graphics processor is doing all the work of creating all the frames, of rendering everything for the game. And when you alt tab out, it's going to keep doing that, right? It's still handling what's happening in the game, even if you aren't actually looking at it at the time. Now, what max background FPS does is it makes it so that it lowers the maximum frames that it will render while it's in the background. But then, like I said, you go back to the game and it goes from it was maximum of 30 frames per second to now all of a sudden you're getting your 120 and it can cause some issues. I've actually had it cause it to freeze up on me, and I have to alt tab back out, alt tab back in, and stuff like that. So I tend to just turn that one off. Now, target frames per second, you can leave it on. It does affect certain things, kind of like that thing we were talking about earlier when we were talking about dynamic spell effects. Um, 60 frames per second is your target. You don't want to be any lower than 60 frames per second. There are going to be times where you dip. Even with really good processors, there are certain zones that are just full of people, full of all kinds of crap, doing all kinds of things, and you're flying so you can see all of it, and your frame rate is just going to drop. And you were doing great. You're getting 80, 90 frames per second. All of a sudden, you're getting 30 frames a second. You're like, why? Bunch of shit's going on. That's all it is. Target frames per second, 60 FPS. Let's stick with that. Um, Resample sharpness, contrast, brightness, gamma. These are things that have to do with color. We're not going to worry about that. Compatibility settings. These are also going to be things that you'll have to decide on your own whether or not they are things you need to worry about. Okay. Keep in mind, you can screw all of this up, mess everything up, and come back up here and just hit defaults, and it's just going to take you right back to where you were from the very beginning. Now that we're done with that, we're going to apply and exit. It's probably going to have to reset some of my settings. Okay, there we go. All right. So we've checked out the options. We've got some cinematics, right? We could check this out. Holy crap, there are tons of them. Okay, we got 2 pages of these freaking cinematics. And here is the reason why I wanted to start this channel. This is why I wanted to start this series of, you know, helping to explain the game for people who have either not played it before or who have been gone for a long time, right? I started in Classic WoW. I didn't get very far in Classic. I got to, I think it was level 44 on my rogue when I was playing Classic. Uh, then Burning Crusade came out. We got to go to Outlands, and that's where, as a player, I was shining. I was doing everything that I could to be the best player that I could be. That's where I was really coming into being a good player. That was the second expansion. Third expansion, Wrath. of the Lich King. That to me was the epitome of World of Warcraft. That is where everything shined. That to me was the best expansion. I remember getting in there and doing Ice Crown Citadel. They had just turned on the ability to create hard modes. So you could do 10 man or you could do 25-man raids, and you could turn on hard mode. And if you were downing the Lich King on 25 hard modes, man, you guys were doing awesome. Then we come to Cataclysm. Cataclysm, they had this whole big shakeup. Really, what it was is they had the story from Warcraft, Warcraft 2, and Warcraft 3, Frozen Throne, the RTS games that everybody was introduced to Warcraft from. And this was the storyline. You know, Cataclysm, it was almost like they didn't know what to do next. And they were like, let's just break everything. Now, that's not to say that Cataclysm wasn't good, but this to me was the start of the downfall. Now, and as I'm showing you these, you can check out all these videos. These videos are awesome, especially like the Burning Crusade video. Illidan dropping down in his voice, letting everybody know you are not prepared. That shit was awesome. Cataclysm, we had Deathwing waking up or some crap like that and deciding that he's gonna take shit over. And somehow this dragon, who, albeit he's pretty big, him coming through the where he was hidden in a cave in the earth, somehow sundered the entire freaking planet and changed everything. You couldn't walk from northern barrens to southern barrens anymore. I mean, one of the most iconic leveling areas for Horde was now split in two by this giant fire chasm, and in some zones, you'd be walking around, and all of a sudden, Deathwing flies over and scorches the earth, and you're dead. And you can't even go back to your body and res because your body is in the fire, and if you res, you die again. It was stupid. Anyway, there were things that I absolutely loved about Cataclysm, and some things I absolutely hated. Now, I was in the beta for Wrath of the Lich King. I was in the beta for Cataclysm. I got to see some of the new stuff, and then I got into the beta for Miss of Pandaria, and I was really liking Mop at first. I got in there, seeing the new monk class, seeing the Pandaren, getting to see all that stuff, and that was really it. I really just was not excited about the game in general. At that point, a lot of people were just kind of fading out. This is where you started to see the decline of the World of Warcraft. Um, that was where I quit. I played in the beta and never actually played when it went live. Um, that's when I quit. We go into Warlords of Draenor, Legion, Battle for Azeroth, Shadowlands. I never saw any of these. You know, I have since learned about a lot of the lore as playing through some of the storylines, and I will get into how you can play through each of these. If you want to get the style of the quests and how things were done in Classic, you can. If you want to go through the Outlands and play the Burning Crusade, you can. You can level up all the way from level 1 to level 70 in nothing but the Burning Crusade. Or you can live through, you know, the Wrath of the Lich King. You can play level 1 through 70, finding Dalaran floating above and near the Ice Crown Citadel. If you want to play in Cataclysm, you can certainly see all of those new things. Blizzard did a really good job, though it's very confusing on how they do what they call throw me time. There's an NPC who is a little gnome female, little cute gnome female that is actually a big brown dragon. And if you don't know this, The brown dragons are the ones who help control the flow of time. They are the time guardians. And Chromie will allow you to relive the past experiences of World of Warcraft. That was how I got to relive some of the stuff from Warlords of Draenor, Legion, BFA, and especially Shadowlands. I really liked Shadowlands. As far as excuse me, as far as the storyline went, all right, the storyline to me for Shadowlands was awesome. Now, from all of my friends that I've played with, a lot of them say they freaking hated Shadowlands. And that has to do not with the lore of the game or of that expansion, but with the way that they handled rating progression, mythic progression, things of that nature. The the meat and potatoes of the game, of the expansion, and not just how the plate of spaghetti looks, right? But then we get into Dragonflight. Dragonflight is where I came back to WoW. I hadn't played in about 10 years. Came back, saw Dragonflight, thought it looked pretty cool, was like, all right, let's go check this out. Came into Dragonflight and was so overwhelmed with all of the different changes. I had no freaking clue what I was doing. I leveled up a guy to I think it was 60 at the time. It might have been 70. Anyway, I leveled up a hunter. I leveled up a druid. I leveled up one of the new classes, the Drakthir. Wanted to play as like, a dragonkin. So I did that. And with all of the changes in how the roles had changed. I used to main a druid, and I'm playing a druid now and had no freaking clue what I was doing. So I went and I started playing classic WoW. You're probably aware that there's a couple of different versions. There's classic WoW hardcore, where you play, you die, you have to start over. You lose all your shit. You got to start. It's freaking hardcore. And there's a lot of people that really love it. I tried it out, and after about the sixth death, I was like, yep, can't do this. Right. Then there's classic fresh, which is what they're doing right now. It's the 20th anniversary classic fresh servers, and it's just like the original, World of Warcraft, classic. It's pretty good. Of course, they've put in some of the better quality of life things. There's some people who don't agree with some of the changes that were made. Personally, I think they did a pretty damn good job. Um, there's also right now it is Wrath of the Lich King. No, I'm sorry, it is Cataclysm, which is the classic server, and it is about to progress into the what is it, Mists of Pandaria. So, you can join that and you can play through Cataclysm if you want to, just like Cataclysm was back in the day. You can fight Deathwing. You can try to get your Fangs of the Father legendary daggers for your rogue. You can try to get your legendary staff for your mage if you can fight off everybody else that wants it too, um, which they've made that easier, but now it's about to progress into Miss Pandaria Classic. And if you're into going back and seeing some of those old expansions, or maybe you missed them before, I definitely suggest going and checking them out. But keep in mind, it is a time sink. You're going to be sucked in and you're going to be spending all your hours doing that. For the purposes of this series, I'm going to be focusing on retail, which right now we are in the War Within. We're actually in the first part of the War Within, which it was announced that there are going to be three parts. We're in the Shadows Beneath. I think the next one is called Midnight, and I don't remember what the third one is called. But it is basically a three expansion um, trilogy. Like Star Wars or The Lord of the Rings. Um, you know, three parts to it, and the storyline is going to flow from one to the next. Now, as far as Dragonflight goes, I skipped a lot of it. I played through, leveled up, was so overwhelmed by all the new stuff. I went off and played Season of Discovery. Season of Discovery is another one of the classic realms you can play. It is classic vanilla with a twist. They've had a system of runes that you can take your rune and that you find and you apply it to say your chest. And now what it does is it changes one of your spells or even adds a spell to your abilities so that you can uh, heal as a mage or tank as a warlock. You know, these are things that really changed up the roles. I thought it was pretty fun. Um, it was one of those things that the way they were coming out with it, step by step, I felt it was kind of slow. We were clearing content pretty quick because it wasn't very difficult. And that was their purpose. They weren't trying to make it difficult. They wanted it for, the moderate players, so that just about anybody could get in and enjoy themselves and see end game content. And the thing is, now me and my guild, we were clearing the newest content in the first 2 weeks. And after that, it was just farming the same stuff over and over again. And it got boring. And so I decided to come back to retail. And that's where we come to the War Within. That's where I'm going to start with this series and how to teach you as a new player or a player who's coming back how to jump back into the game or how to start the game. All right. So here's what we've got. We've got our main menu. The first thing we need to do is create a character. And if you notice, when I hover over this, it says Ashara realm. That's because it doesn't give you a list of realms to choose from just right off the bat anymore. Now you have to go up here to your realms. And the thing about realms is you notice these are all normal realms that are for new players. And it was trying to put me into Ashara. This is one of their newer servers. It's like their overload server where they're trying to get people to get on this server because their other servers are overcrowded or whatnot. I don't agree with how they're doing it, but my personal opinion is to always go with a full server. This might seem counterintuitive, but the thing is this is a multiplayer game. And if you want to be able to do content where you need other people, you want to be on a server or a server group where you have access to more people. Now, most of my characters on my normal account are on Area 52. I've got a couple on some other ones like Illidan, stuff like that. I want to go ahead and stay away from those servers just so that I'm not getting any kind of, I don't know, uh, help from people that might recognize me. All right. So we're going to start on, let's pick a random one. You know what? I've never played on Hellscream. I've never played on Gorfine. I don't know what the server atmosphere is like on some of these. The other thing you want to think about is the server economy. These full servers tend to have a much better economy. There's going to be those items that are really hard to get, and on the lower population servers, they're going to be so expensive you're never going to be able to get them. But on the higher population servers, more than one's probably going to drop, and those two people are going to be competing against each other to be able to sell it, and so the prices drop. Basic economics, supply and demand. If there's more supply for the same amount of demand, prices are going to go down. So that's another reason why I like these full servers. And let's just go ahead. We'll just start with the very first one, Agrimar. Never been on this server. Let's try it out. So you have selected a full server, which can result in a wait to play. You should consider selecting a server with a low population. Do you really want to select this server? Okay, so what it's warning us about is login queues. They can happen from time to time. When the server is really getting bogged down by how many people have logged in, it can happen where you'll get into a login queue. This used to happen a lot. I almost never see it now. It's one of those things that it still warns you about, but it's really not an issue. We have been getting a lot of DDoS attacks on the file servers lately, and that can cause queues. But that's actually more along the lines of just logging into Blizzard itself, not logging into one of your World of Warcraft servers. Like, you can't even play Overwatch, let alone play World of Warcraft. And if you're trying to play Call of Duty, how can you if you've got it on your BattleNet account and you're in a queue waiting to log into BattleNet? So really, the server queues are more to do with nowadays with the BattleNet services, not so much with the World of Warcraft servers themselves. So yes, we do want to select this server. All right, we have now selected Agrimar and we're going to create our new character, right? So let's see. This is a big decision. You know, Before we jump into picking a class, because we've got hunters, warriors, mages, monks, shaman, rogue, priest, war. We got a whole bunch of classes that we could choose from. This is like some overload shit going on right now. I'm looking at all this going, I have no fucking clue what I'm doing. Which one do I choose? Which one's the best? Which one should I choose? Man, I want to be the baddest motherfucker around. Which one is it? I'm going to tell you right now, they're all really well balanced. When it comes to power, you're really not going to find that much difference between one and another. There are meta specs. You will see on websites tier lists where they say that right now, Fire Mage is the fucking thing to play. And realistically, what it comes down to is they are looking at the top players in the top gear and how they're all competing against each other. If you have 10 people who are all in the best of everything, and these are the best players, then yeah, you're going to find out of those 10 players, the Fire Mage is doing about 3% better than the Unholy Death Knight. And really, that's what it's about is those small percentages. When realistically, the people you're going to be competing against is yourself. You're going to be competing against yourself. You need to be working on your gear, getting your item level up, making sure that your gear has the correct stats, and just doing as good as you can with the character that you're playing. Some characters don't do so well in the beginning of end game content, and that's because they just don't scale very well without better gear. Things like a warrior. An arms warrior is going to be dual wielding two-handed weapons. And if you can't afford two-handed weapons of the highest item level, you're going to be doing a bit lackluster damage. But at the same time, once you do get, those two badass weapons you've been trying for, you're going to see a major increase in your DPS. And as I'm recording this right now, Arms Warrior is doing really well in the tier lists, and it has to do with the fact that the guys who are in those lists are ones who are geared to the teeth and they're playing it well. Arms is a pretty simple spec to play, and they just dish out pretty damn good damage considering the gear that they're dealing with. Um, let's see. Now, the thing about character selection is that there are three main roles that we need to talk. The main roles are tank, healer, and DPS. Your damage dealers, your healers, and your tanks. All right. When it comes to a class, some classes are meant for a certain role. Some classes are meant for other roles. But realistically, some classes can do all three roles just fine. Right? Some classes only do one. Hunter, for example, only does DPS. They don't do anything else. Now they have three specs, so they have three different ways of doing DPS. They've got Beastmaster, where they rely on their pets to do most of their damage. They got Marksman, where their aimed shot is what they're really relying on. And if you go with Dark Ranger, they're really taking that dark arrow and putting as much as they can into it. And then you've got Survival, which changes up the hunter completely into this melee monster who him and his pets work together to act like a pack of wolves who are taking down stag. You know, so don't get confused about the roles and the classes because most classes can do just about any role, but there are limitations. That's also what this series is about. Um, some roles are harder to learn, but give you more control. Some roles seem simple, but they put you in a high pressure situation fast. So I'm going to break it down real quick. Okay. Healers. Healers keep the group alive. You're watching health bars, clearing debuffs, and reacting to incoming damage. Some people just love that kind of high stakes reactive play. You are reacting to everything. Damage comes in, you've got to take care of it. Can you take care of the damage before it comes in? Do you know that damage is coming in and you might be able to do something like put a shield on somebody? Great. Personally, not my cup of tea. I love good healers. I respect healers. I'm just not a very good one. So I don't enjoy the way that role plays, and that's okay. So the focus of this stream is definitely not going to be on healers. With that being said, I do have a healer. I have a monk. I love the style of monk that you can play, which is called fist weaving. Their healing spec is actually called mist weaving because they're using the renewing mists to heal people, but a lot of their healing actually comes from the damage that they do. And this is a kind of a subclass that people refer to as fist weaving. And so what I did with mine is I tried to make mine to where all the healing was as passive as I could make it while still having the options to be able to do some oh shit healing if I needed to. Then I just play the class as if it's a DPS. I get in there, I do my DPS, I'm keeping watch on everything. So it's way more reactive than a DPS class, way less intuitive than a DPS class. And when shit happens, I need to be able to react to it as a healer would. So to me, it was actually pretty fun as a healer class. But also, with that being said, it does not compete with somebody who's actually a healer. I can go into a raid, be a healer, and do great. My passive healing helps keep the entire raid going. And actually, what it does is it just really helps out my other healers to be able to focus on what they're doing. So, is healing as a monk, even for somebody who hates healing, possible? Oh hell yeah, yeah, and I actually enjoy it sometimes. Now, so our next one is going to be DPS. Um, DPS stands for damage per second. If you're doing 5,000 damage, but it takes you 5 seconds to do that damage, then you've got 1,000 DPS, right? Now, if you do 5,000 damage, but it only takes you 2 seconds to do it, then you're doing 2,500 DPS, 2.5 times more damage. But that's where the name DPS comes from, is damage per second. All right. But really, when people refer to DPS, a lot of times now, they're actually talking about the role that the character is taking. Hey, man, can you switch from your tank spec to your DPS spec? What they're asking is, can you be a damage dealer instead of a tank on this pull? They are by far the most common role. Whether it's fireballs, daggers, bows, whatever, your job is to kill enemies and to kill them fast. DPS classes come in a huge variety because there's so many. They're also the most replaceable person in a group. All right. You can always find a DPS. When you're trying to get a group together, you might struggle finding a tank. It might be hard to find a healer. It's never hard to find DPS. DPS are everywhere. All right. So good DPS understand positioning, threat, and pacing. Bad DPS just tunnel vision and hope that they get heals. Guess which one we're trying to avoid here? I joke about it in Discord all the time. People will say things like, "Oh, hey, standing in the fire will give you a buff that helps your damage." And they're joking because standing in the fire will kill you. The joke that I like to use is, it's crazy. I like standing in the fire because every time I do, I'm suddenly getting healing from everywhere, and I can't even figure out why. I don't know what I'm doing to get these heals, but man, I like getting healed. So every time I can, I stand in the fire. And this is a joke. It's retarded. Don't do that. Don't stand in the fire. All right. So that takes us to our next one, which is tanks. All right. The tank, the role that gets the least amount of love from new players. But really, it should be the first one you try. Tanks control the fight. They lead the group. They learn the mechanics first. You don't just play the game, you understand it because you're the one doing the pulling. You're the one keeping positioning. You're the one that's keeping everything together. The healer is keeping you alive, and they are super important. But you, the tank, are the one that's leading. You are the one that's doing the pulling. You are the one that decides what's going on. The tank. All right. So does that come with pressure? Yeah. Yeah. But that pressure teaches you faster than anything else. And the truth is, every tank class can also DPS, and some of them can even heal. So choosing to start as a tank doesn't lock you in. It sets you up with the knowledge you'll need no matter what role you end up playing later. Right? With that said, my focus here is going to be going in as a tank. The process of leveling up, getting to level 80 right now is easy. It's fast, but it doesn't explain anything to you. That's why I'm doing this stream. That's why I'm doing these videos. I want to help teach you how to jump into the game at level 1, get some things done, and instead of just suddenly realizing you're level 25 already and have no freaking clue what all this extra shit is, I'm going to do it as a tank. I'm going to do it so that you can get into dungeons whenever you want to, because trust me, as a tank, you're going to be able to get into dungeons. Right? I want you to be able to do the quest lines. I want you to be able to experience the game as it was meant to be experienced. And right now, WoW just isn't really set up for that. They're set up for leveling you up as fast as possible to get you to the end game. And why is that? Because they make money on cosmetic items. And nobody leveling buys cosmetic items. They want you at the maximum level, enjoying all of their content at end level so that you will buy the cosmetics. Of course, they're going to hand you a whole bunch of cosmetics free, and you're going to be able to farm those free cosmetics by doing dungeons over and over again. You could even go into old, raids and stuff like that to get cosmetics that might actually sell for a premium. And there are plenty of people online that tell you you can make millions of gold farming old content and putting that stuff up on the auction house for 100,000 gold, 200,000 gold, 1,000,000 gold for a cloak. Why? Because it's the ninja cloak. It's the one that if you want to dress up as a ninja, if you want your character to look like a ninja, you need this cloak because none of the other cloaks look worth a shit when it comes to looking like a ninja. And that's the thing about what WoW is doing right now. Blizzard is creating an environment where they want you at maximum level as quickly as possible so that you will spend money. Nothing wrong with that, really. Really, they are a business. People joke all the time that they're a small indie company. That's why they can't get shit right. Really, they can't get a lot of shit right because their focus is not on fixing bugs if they're not game breaking. If it's not breaking the game, they only have so much focus they can put on things, and they're damn sure going to put it on something that helps them make more money. And that's just how it is. Well, as we're leveling, if you're a new player, you are suddenly going to find yourself at level 50 very quickly, level 60 even. And you're not going to know anything about what you're doing. And the things that you are learning when you hit level 80 aren't going to matter. Completely different. You're going to learn to do things getting up to level 70 that when you hit level 80 are the complete opposite of what you should be doing. Right? So, what I'm going to be trying to do is set you up so that when you hit level 80, the things that you've been learning taking this trip with me are the things that are going to matter when you hit level 80. Right? All right. So, let's take a look at the character creation screen. Things get murky real quick. You've got classes, got a bunch of classes. Okay. You got races, Horde, Alliance. If you notice, I don't have any of the extras unlocked. In fact, you'll see this Drakthir. I have to reach level 10 just to unlock this race. Right? Well, I actually really like Drakthir. It might be something that we transition to in a later video. I will explain why here in a little bit. But really, what we've got with classes is the specs and the roles. So the game doesn't really explain what any of it means in practice. It might say tank next to a class, but it doesn't tell you how it plays, whether it can switch to DPS later, or what kind of utility it brings to a group. So I'll break it down class by class, spec by spec, and race by race, and I'll give you the real talk on what actually matters for a new player choosing their first tank. All right, so let me gather my thoughts here for a second. Okay, so let's see, where should we start? All right, we've already decided we're going to start with a tank, right? One of the biggest reasons is that tanks have very good survivability. They are a class that is going to be highly desirable. Everybody's looking for tanks. Tanks, being a tank is going to teach you more about the game than any of the other classes. The biggest reason that most new players stay away from tanking is what we call tanxiety. And it actually has a term. This is something that's been known since the very beginning. People are afraid of being a tank because they are the one that people are relying on. They don't want people yelling at them and telling them that they suck. things like that. But guess what? You're a new player, you're going to suck. And there are millions of people playing World of Warcraft. Who gives a shit about that asshole who thinks that you're a shitty tank? Well, guess what? You might be a shitty tank right now, but how are you going to be a good tank? By playing a tank, right? And then when you've learned what it means to be a tank and you get to the later levels and you decide to take your freaking prot warrior, turn it into an arms warrior, you're going to know why the tank needs to position correctly. And you'll be the one that's in the guild going, hey, man, you know that you're tanking this over here. And really, what you should be doing is facing him this way. Because what you're doing right now is you're hitting us with the tail swipe. And we need to be kind of behind the boss. But if there's tail swipe, we need to be to the side where we're still getting those abilities of being behind the boss, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to get too much into it, but you will have an understanding of what the tank does when you become a DPS, if that's what you decide to do. Some people play tanks, and that's all they'll play. Personally, I love tanking. Tanking is a blast. How many tanks do I have? Quite a few. How many of them do I tank with? Almost none of them. They're almost all DPS. My paladin is ret. My warrior is arms. My druid, he's feral. My monk is a healer. So I have played all of these classes as tanks, and most of them I play as something else because tanking is fun, but I like a little bit of variety as well. And that's another good thing about playing a tank. You can always do something else. Now, let's take a look at what our tank classes are. We've got warrior. Let's see if we can. Let's choose a Tauren just so we can get a better idea of what some of them. Okay. So we've got warrior. Warrior is your sword and board. They're the guys who have a sword and a shield. They block damage, they mitigate damage. They are really good at what they do when it comes to being able to handle the damage. They've got pretty good threat generation. All right. The thing they're not so good at, magic. If somebody's casting magic at them, they have a single spell really that helps, and it's spell reflect. It's on a cooldown. It's kind of hard, makes it kind of hard to deal with. All right. The next one, Paladin. Um, Paladin, to me, one of the best tanks out there. They have a couple of ranged abilities. They can pull from range. They do pretty good threat. They've got really good AoE threat, and that's threat on multiple mobs at once. They also do some self healing. They've got Word of Glory that if you spec into it correctly, you just get free Word of Glories every like 15 seconds or something that you can use on yourself to keep yourself up and help your healers out. Or hell, you could even put them on somebody else who's getting low, help your healers out that way. You know, um, Paladin tanks are some of my favorite tanks. Um, with that being said, we've got the Druid. Druids, man, these guys are mobile. They are super mobile. You can roll and you can torpedo dodge and all kinds of cool crap like that. They've got pretty good AoE threat. They've got pretty good damage. Their damage profile is pretty good. Um, their ability to sustain and mitigate damage is actually really good because they have a mechanic that, whether it's physical damage or magical damage, the damage that they've taken, they offset that damage into a dot or damage over time. And what this does is it allows the healers time to heal them through that damage so that you don't get these big spikes of damage. It levels it out a bit. The other thing is they can then take that damage that they've turned into a dot and actually reduce the amount of damage in that dot, making it a smaller dot. That is part of the way that their damage mitigation goes. Um, they are not a blocking healer; they are a dodging healer, right? A tank. They're a dodging tank. They're not a blocking tank. So like the warrior, they're sword and board. Their mitigation comes from dodge, block, and parry. Right? They're going to be dodging some blows. They're going to be blocking some damage, and they're going to be parrying some blows. Same thing with paladin. Dodge, block, and parry. Okay. Main thing you need to remember too is as anybody, you cannot block and you cannot dodge, you cannot parry stuff that's coming from behind you. If you turn your back on a mob, you're taking the full brunt of that damage. All right. Now we get to the monk and the druid. These two don't have the same type of mitigation. You know, monks, they're going to use a weapon. Um, they are going usually it's going to be fist weapons. They are going to have some parry. It's not very much. Death Knights, they don't have a shield. They've got a great big two-handed sword or axe. They have a lot of parry. Most of their damage mitigation comes from dodge and parry. Monks, most of their mitigation is going to come from dodge and the fact that they can mitigate the damage out into a dot. Then we come to the one that I think is going to be the best for all of us, and that's going to be Druid. Like I said before, I mained a Druid for a long time. I am pretty familiar with Druids and how they work. Not so much anymore because, like I said, they've changed up a lot of stuff. So some of this stuff I'm going to be learning right along with you, but I've been someone that's I'm someone that's been playing this game since 2006. So getting pretty close to 20 years now. Um, the druid to me, their mitigation comes mostly from dodge. That's going to come from their agility. Agility also grants them attack power while they're in cat form. If you notice right here, he turned into a cat. That means that you, as a bear druid, tanking away, if you're suddenly the guy that doesn't need to be tanking right this moment, you could switch to cat form and start doing damage. You turn into a DPSer on the fly. Now, that's a utility aspect. I don't suggest doing that all the time. That gets a little more complicated into how the rotations go and such. But keep in mind that I think that druids have some of the most utility, except for maybe paladins. Paladins have quite a bit of utility in what they can provide to a group, but druids have a lot of utility in what they do. I remember being on my druid as a moonkin, as a balanced druid, shooting lightning bolts and hitting people with moonbeams. And all of a sudden, I see one of our healers getting attacked. And if that healer goes down, I know that our entire group is going down with him. So what do? I change into bear form and I barrel charge over to that mob and I taunt him and I hit all my defensive abilities. These defensive abilities are there. They're not going to be anywhere near as good because I'm not in my tank spec. I'm in my DPS spec, but they're going to help out, right? So I'm not going to be able to tank this thing, but I'll be able to handle him for a good 5 seconds or so until the tank can get it back. What happens to me? I die, but I held that freaking thing. And what is the role of a tank? Keep the monsters off everybody else, keep threats, and mitigate damage. That's your role. Your role is to keep everyone else alive. Sometimes, even if it means you dying. That's what I did. Jump in there, get aggro, taunt, mitigate whatever damage I can, and keep the healer from dying. The other tank, the main tank, was finally able to get aggro back pretty quickly. I died. We finished out that boss fight and we got it. We won. I got a res afterwards. I got to share in the loot. That's to me the epitome of what it means to be a druid, uh, tank or anything else. Um, That is what I think we should be going with. As far as druids go, druids are limited on who can be a druid. All right. Can I be a goblin druid? Nope. Can I be? Nope. Can I be? Oh, a troll could be a druid. Okay. A tauren can be a druid. Undead? Nope. Orc? Nope. Panda? Nope. Worgen? Yeah, Worgen can be. Draenei? No. Gnome? No. Night elf? Yep, night elf can. Dwarf? Human? No. Okay, so we're limited on what races we can be. So now what we need to do is, now that we've chosen to be a druid, we need to figure out what class is going to be the best class for druid, right? So now I'm on human right now, right? And I can't be a druid. So what it's going to do when I hover over it is it's going to show me which ones can be druid. And if you notice, it's night elf, worgen, troll, and tauren. So let's take a look at these four. What do they provide? So we've got the night elf. I'm going to right click on the night elf and it's going to show me what the racial traits are for the night elf. First off, they can fade into shadows. This is called shadow meld. Shadow meld, very powerful. If I remember right, I don't think they've changed it, but this can pull you out of combat, right? So it's like a boss needs to be reset because everybody's used up all their cooldowns, and we know that if we reset the mob, we'll get our cooldowns back. This may not work anymore. I know it's something that we used to do. But anybody that was a night elf could run up, hit the boss. The boss is going to target them, start running towards him, and then he's just going to fade into the shadows. He's going to shadow meld. And since nobody else hit the boss or was within range of the boss just despawns. He gets reset. And that was a reset mechanic. That was shadow meld resetting. Another thing that you can do with shadow meld, super, super powerful, is let's say the boss is targeting you with an ability that hurts real bad. Might even be one of those things that could kill a tank. If the tank doesn't have his ability that he normally use to mitigate that damaging ability, what you might be able to do is shift into bear form, taunt the boss real quick before the starts going off. Of course, this comes into a matter of knowing the mechanics and knowing your fights. You know this tank buster is about to go off. So what do? You switch into bear, you taunt the boss. When the boss turns to you, he starts casting that great big cast, and then right at the end of it, you hit shadow meld. You disappear, and the boss doesn't even cast the spell anymore. Now, this doesn't always work. It's not one of those mechanics that it's going to work on every boss or with every ability. It has limited usage, but that's the thing about this racial trait for night elves of can fade into the shadows. That is an awesome mechanic. Now, as we go over some of the other ones, they're more difficult to hit. They have higher dodge. That's great for druids because as a bear, a lot of your mitigation comes from being able to dodge. So the more difficult to hit, that's a good one. Right? Move faster when dead. Okay, so this is one I kind of have an issue with, but granted, it does help. When you die, you have to move as a ghost back to your body, and you're just moving along at your normal movement rate. Well, night elves, when they're dead, they're not a ghost so much as a night wisp. And night wisps, they get to move a little bit faster. So, okay, cool. Resistant to nature damage does what it says. They're slightly resistant to nature damage. Faster movement while stealth. This again, this is another good one for druids. Because what if you decide to go feral and you want to be a cat druid? You're going to be moving around in stealth. And this does, I think it's a 3% movement increase. And that may not sound like much, but it is an extra 3%. When you consider you in cap form with this buff next to the Tauren druid in cap form that doesn't have this buff, and you're trying to run away from him, he'll never catch you. That's the difference that 3% can make. So it is a good one. Um, Faster attacks at night and increased critical chance during the day. So what happens is when it's nighttime, you're going to get a haste, an improvement to your haste, and during the day, you're going to have an improvement to your critical chance. Um, when you're looking at the balance of all the classes, every race is going to have certain of these types of abilities. Um, Almost all of the races are completely balanced to within like half to 1% of what it means to DPS meters. So really, I like to look at the utility of the races, not at what it brings to, like, is this going to do more damage than this? Yes, there are certain classes that do slightly more damage, but like I said, you're talking about at most like a 1% increase in your damage. Excuse me real quick. I'm going to take a drink. Hydration check. All right. So that's the Night Elf. The next one we're going to look at is Worgen. I've never played a Worgen Druid. I've heard they're pretty cool. But let's take a look at their racial traits. Can periodically move quicker. They have kind of like what's it called? A sprint ability. What it does is, Worgans have this, they're werewolves basically. So they have their human form and their werewolf form, their Worgen form. So you're running along, you're running down the road, you're in your human form, and you want to suddenly start running a little bit faster. So you're going to hit your sprint ability. And what happens is you change into your wolf form and you go down on on all four limbs, and you just start hauling ass. And it's an extra sprint. Cool. It's an extra sprint. Okay. So that's like with the Night Elf. They get the fade into shadows. Organs get an extra sprint. This critical chance increased. That's just like the Night Elf. The Night Elf gets a critical chance increase, except for it's only during the day. At night, they get a haste increase. Well, Worgen, they get the critical chance increase just all the time. Then you got resistance to nature and shadow damage, right? Well, the Night Elf has resistance to nature damage. Well, this has nature and shadow, so shouldn't that be better? Nope. It's half what the other one is, right? So a night elf might have a 3% resistance to nature damage, and the Worgans only got 1.5% resistance to nature damage. But they also have 1.5% resistance to shadow damage. Okay, so again, it's one of those things. It's about balance. You're going to see that type of stuff everywhere, no matter what race you pick. Okay. The other one they have is skinning skill and speed are increased. They actually skin faster. That's pretty good. That's one of those utilities that I really like because you may not realize it, but that's one of those things that can speed up your leveling time or your farming time. If you're a skinner, and you're needing to go out there and skin stuff all the time, your skinning speed is going to add up over time. If you're skinning for an hour and you got 60 pieces of leather normally, with this, you might have gotten 65 pieces of leather. And that may not sound like much, but it does definitely add up. So again, that's another one that's pretty cool. All right, so what are our other two? We've got Troll and we've got Tauren. Okay, let's look at the troll real quick. Troll, Berserk, increasing attack and casting speed. They get a major haste buff. Out of all of the classes, when it comes to what their racial abilities add, to their damage meters, to me, this is one of the best ones. If you're going strictly for how can I increase my damage, then Berserk is one of the good ones. Um, there are some others that are comparable, um, but to me, this is one of the best ones. Regeneration is increased. Um, I don't remember if it works the same way. Remember, I've been playing Classic and SOD and everything else as well, so some of them work a little bit differently. But I think that the troll can regenerate health even in combat. Even if it's not very much, they do regenerate during combat. Whereas normally in combat, you do not regenerate health. You have to take a potion, you have to do some healing, you have to use an item that heals you. You are not getting back your health unless you're doing something specifically to get your health back during combat. The troll, and like I said, disclaimer here, I might be wrong on this one. Troll, they get their natural regeneration, their troll regeneration, even during combat. Now, out of combat, they're going to get the normal generation that everybody gets, the regeneration, but a little bit extra, that little bit extra troll regeneration. So that's cool. Um, Increased experience gained from killing beasts. That to me is useless. Yeah, you're going to be fighting beasts quite a lot. The amount of experience, maybe you would even say, well, like with the skinning speed increase, doesn't it just add up over time? Isn't it one of those things that surprisingly comes out really well? Normally, I would say yes, but you're not going to have to worry about leveling up. You are going to level up so fast, it's crazy. You're going to level up too quickly. Trust me. You are not going to even know what you're doing at the level you're at before you're 10 levels higher. All right? That one to me is useless. All right, so what's the next one? Reduced duration of movement impairing effects. Okay, so this is a passive ability, right? So somebody throws a net on you. You're fighting a spider and they hit you with a spider web. Oh no, you can't move. It doesn't last as long on trolls. Not bad. It's a good one. It's not anything spectacular. It's a good one. The better one you'll see on orcs is their resistance to stun effects, which we can't be an orc druid. I'm just showing this for the sake of posterity. Resistant to stun effects. That one is way better. Why? Because it's good for PvP. Why? Because in PvP, people like to stun the shit out of you. And on orcs, it don't last as long, right? So there's something called diminishing returns. I will hit you with a stun spell, and it will stun you for 6 seconds. Then my partner will hit you with a stun spell, and it'll only stun you for 5 seconds. Then the next stun spell only stuns you for four, and then three, and then two. I'm oversimplifying this, but you get what I mean by the diminishing return, right? There is a diminishing return on stun effects. This resistant to stun effects, oh yeah, it really helps out with that diminishing returns. All right, so back to the troll. We've seen the troll racials. Berserk sounds really good. Might be pretty good for a druid, but really just doesn't sound as good as the Worgen with their skinning skill and their extra sprint and their extra critical chance, or really the Night Elf. So far, the Night Elf is sounding like the best. They have Shadow Meld. Shadow Meld's cool. They move faster when they're stealth. You are going to be moving around in stealth quite a bit. Even as a tank, you're going to switch to cat, move around in stealth. All right. Um, can fade into shadows. Shadow meld. Great. Okay. So far, Night Elf is looking best. Let's look at Tauren. All right. So they've got one. Stomp. Stunning nearby enemies. Okay. This is War Stomp. War Stomp is awesome. War Stomp is an interrupt. You can interrupt spell casting that normally can't be interrupted because maybe the mob that's doing the casting is susceptible to crowd control, right? So this is an interrupt that works through crowd control. It's called a stop. I'm going to stop you from casting. I'm not interrupting your casting. Okay. The other thing about Taurens is they have increased stamina. Now, if we're focusing purely on tanking, increased stamina is awesome. It's awesome. You have more hit points. And the thing about druids, the way that they mitigate damage, they don't block, they don't parry, they dodge, and they soak. They are soak monsters. They have shit tons of hit points. That's how they're able to survive. How can they take that big ass hit? Because they've got plenty of fucking life left. That's how they take that hit. Right? And when it comes to taking more hits, Torin, awesome. Now, at maximum level, the amount of hit point increase that you get from being a Tauren is actually pretty well balanced with the other classes' abilities that they get. So, yes, this is very good for tanking. But maybe it's not so good for other things. You know, doesn't really help too much if you're playing your cat or your moonkin, or as a healer if you decide to go that route. So it is pretty one dimensional, but we are talking about tanking. So normally I play Tauren Druids, but it also has to do with the fact that I like Horde more than Alliance, personal preference. But we're not going to worry about my personal preferences on this. We're trying to look at this objectively, right? Okay, so what are their other abilities? Herbalism, skill, and speed increase. Man, that's just like the skinning. Okay, and let me tell you, as we're leveling up, those are going to be my two main things that I'm going to suggest as professions. I'm going to suggest that you take skinning because you're going to be in melee range all the time. So when something dies, you're going to be right there ready to skin it. Skinning makes money. It may not be much, but it's more than what you're going to have without it. And as a new player, you're not going to have friends just handing you money. You're not going to have a high level alt that you can just transfer money from, right? You're going to have to make all your own money. Skinning is the first one. The second one is either herbalism or mining. So this is where we have a little conundrum here. Do we go with the druid that has increased stamina, has an interrupt in their stomp ability, they have increased herbalism skill, they're also resistant to nature damage just like the night elf is, and they have an increased effect from critical strikes. Now, crit is based off of agility, and agility is the bread and butter of druids. Okay, so your crits are going to be high. What this does is it doesn't increase the chance of you getting a crit, it increases the effect of the crit. Basically, you crit harder. It's not making you crit more often. You're already going to be critting more often just because you're a druid and you're stacking freaking agility on everything. You're going to be critting harder. Well, the Worgen has the critical chance increased. This means they crit more often, right? So to me, these are two things that, again, they balance out, right? This one gives me bigger crits. This one gives me more crits. In the long run, those two balance out. So we just eliminate those. Just eliminate those from the equation. It's like, in mathematics where you can just get rid of that part of the equation, right? So resistance to nature damage, same thing. Resistance to nature damage, resistance to nature and shadow damage. This is again another thing we can just eliminate. So what are the things that we're looking at, right? We've got increased stamina, increased herbalism, and stomp. Okay. We've got a sprint and skinning. That's only two compared to three. Okay. The troll has berserk. Math, regeneration, that's kind of cool, but really it's not going to be game changing at all. Berserk is awesome. Like there's classes I've chosen simply, are great. There's been times where I've chosen troll simply because of berserk. But for a druid, no. So right now I'm looking at Tauren has three abilities: increased stamina, stomp, and increased herbalism. So let's look at our night elf. Shadow Meld. That's one. More difficult to hit? Eh, that's a dodge thing. We can kind of keep that in line with the stamina thing. So yeah, look, we can count that one. Okay, so that's two. Um, Move faster when dead? No, that doesn't count. Resistance to nature damage? Nope, we've already removed that one. Okay. Faster movement while stealth. That's a good one. That makes three. Okay. Faster attacks at night and increased crit during the day. Okay. Well, we've removed that from the equation, just like we removed the increased effect from crits. So it looks like both Night Elf and Tauren have similar number of abilities. So now take a look at those abilities that are highly effective for a druid. We've got Shadow Meld. We've got War Stomp. Hmm. I can mitigate. I can mitigate some damage sometimes. I can do some weird cool stuff. Sometimes I can exit combat. Ah, man, if I was on a PvP server, I think I would definitely go with Night Elf simply because of Shadow Meld. Why? Because even if I'm not in cat form, say I want to stay in uh in bear form, if I remember right, you can do this, but you can stay in bear form where you've got all of this high armor and everything, and then you can shadow meld, and then if somebody else is wandering along and they try to gank you, you're already in bear form, you know? And that's if they saw you to begin with, because you've been shadow melded. Right. So if I was on a PvP server, I think I would definitely go with the Night Elf. More difficult to hit. Okay, so that's extra dodge. Tauren, extra hit points. So this is another debate. Do we go with extra hit points or do we go with extra dodge? Hmm. I personally like the extra hit points more. Okay, so we've got two things. If we were on PvP, we'd probably go with Night Elf. Just going with tanking, gonna go with the Tauren. What was our third one? Our third one was faster movement while stealth and herbalism skill speed increased. Okay, I'm gonna have to go with a decision here and say Tauren, and I'm gonna explain the reason why. All right, Stomp compared to Shadow Meld. Stomp is one of those things that can get you out of a scary situation. Say you're fighting a guy and one of his buddies jumps in, and I'm talking about mobs. You're going to come into these situations where things respawn when you didn't know that they were about to, stuff like that. So, you're fighting a guy and something respawns next to him. You're like, okay, I can handle two, right? And then a third guy comes out of nowhere. There's like, oh shit, I've got three. Okay, I'm in bear. I'm switching the cat to bear. I'll see if I can just tank him down, and then a freaking fourth one shows up. Oh shit, I'm gonna die. Can you meld out of that? No, it's not gonna work. Something's always gonna happen that breaks the meld, right? Something was finishing a cast that actually went through. You got hit by an AoE that will pull you out of the meld. Suddenly you're back in combat, and there's nothing compared to Stomp. Stomp doesn't last long. It's, I think, a 1 to 1.5 second stun. It's not a big stun. But you're in bear form, you got four guys on you now. What do? You stomp. Then you turn into your cat form, your travel form, if you've got it yet. You'll get that, I think, level 30. Uh, you turn into your cat form and you sprint away. You know, if you don't have sprint, cat form usually in the early levels of the spec will have those abilities that say faster movement while in cat form. You're going to be able to run away. You're going to have that 1 to 1.5 second head start to get the fuck out of there. And the increased stamina is going to give you the hit points to maybe be able to get away. So I think I'm going to go with the Tauren simply for the sake of survivability and herbalism. Herbalism is one of those things that you're wandering around, you're killing mobs, you're doing quests, and at the same time, you're picking herbs. What are you doing with those herbs? You're putting them on the auction house. You're going to make money off of it. You're not going to make much, but it's going to be money. What about the other professions? Can't you make money enchanting? Can't you make money blacksmithing? What about leatherworking? Couldn't I make my own gear? So what we're talking about here is return on investment, your ROI. In order to get a return in the form of gear or profit, you have to first make an investment. It's going to cost you money to level up leatherworking. Then it will cost you money to make the item that you want, right? So say you want to buy these leather leggings or these boots, huh? Uh, the boots of the Fang, right? Level 20 boots of the Fang. These are some badass boots, and you can make them with leatherworking, right? So you could pay some leather worker to make them for you, or find them on the auction house, and they cost 25 freaking gold. Man, that's everything you've saved up so far. The thing is, if you were to try to make those on your own, you're going to have to level up your leatherworking to where it's high enough to get there anyway, which you're either going to have to do skinning, which, sure, you can do the skinning and the leatherworking, but now instead of making money off of those skins that you could have sold, you're now having to use them to level up your leatherworking just so you can get your leatherworking high enough to where you can make those boots of the Fang. You know? Well, now you already have an investment. That investment has cost you a certain amount. Now you can make the boots of the Fang, but you need the materials. The materials are not always easy to find. You could go out and find them yourself, and it's going to take you time. That, again, is a time investment, not a monetary investment. The same amount of time that you spent trying to farm up that, 3 pieces of spider silk, spider web silk that you needed to be able to make it, you could have instead been wandering around killing random mobs and skinning them and just sold the leather, right? So you're putting in a monetary investment to level up your leatherworking, and then you're putting in a time investment in order to gather the materials, all so that you can make the boots for free. When in actuality, instead of it costing you 25 gold, it probably cost you closer to 40, just so that you could make a single piece of gear. You know? And the fact of the matter is there's other pieces of gear that you can make as you level up as well. But the entire time, instead of making money with your skinning, you're barely going to be skating by just to be able to level up your leatherworking to be able to make stuff for yourself that you could have just bought off the auction house. Well, what about when it comes to endgame? Sure, at endgame, you can get into leatherworking and you can make some serious money. Again, it comes to a time and monetary investment. And guess who's already been doing that? Everybody else. There are people out there that have been doing this for a while and they have been investing all of their time and money into this to where they no longer have to invest. They're now getting a return. They've leveled their shit up. They're at max rank. Their knowledge points have been earned. They've spent their acuity to get the items that they need that help increase their abilities of multicraft and resourcefulness and things like this. They're actually able to make a profit doing this. You're not going to be able to, not at first. Now, when we get to that point, which is most likely going to be in a much later video, I will talk about how you can get into and break into the market of crafting and how to make money doing your professions. But as a newbie, as somebody who's just starting or just coming back, my suggestion, whether you want to follow it or not, is to take herbalism and skinning and go with a Tauren druid. All right. You know what? So now that we've gotten this far, this is where I'm going to go ahead and stop this video. There hasn't been a lot of action. I've been doing a lot of talking. This is the introductory video to my stream, and I hope I haven't turned you off of what this stream can be because I've been so long winded in this. And I really hope that you guys stick around because I really think this can turn into something that can help out a lot of people. And if you're one of those people that are just coming back and seeing this game again and you're just overwhelmed by everything, try this out. Start a new character. Let's go with a Tauren Druid. Travel with me as we figure this out and we can get this done together. And I have the knowledge that I can help impart to you. And heck, maybe I'll even learn some things from my viewers. And I'm almost definitely going to learn some things as we go along as a player myself, which is just going to make me better and more of a badass. So I want to thank you guys for sticking around. If you have stuck around this long, I really, really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, guys.